tonight is actually tech horror. You know, there's always more scares, you know, that are able to come out of the woodwork because of the fears that people have.
And I think the reason that technology makes for such good horror is that it is so constantly changing, and it scares us. The new technology scares us.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Dungeon of Deadly Delights. I'm, of course, Rob DiLauro, and with us always is Miss Holly. Holly, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We just wanted to talk a little bit, real quick about the Stephen King episode. It was a little chock full. Quite a bit of a massive undertaking, and that's available on the HorrorWeb YouTube channel right now. If you guys haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I mean, we talked about the good and the bad, and luckily nothing we said set off Mick Garris, because Mick, actually said he wasn't offended by anything that was said. So that's good. But that was in honor of Dr. Sleep, and it's a whole other discussion. But guys, go out there and see this movie. I mean, it really is worth the watch. And, I mentioned before earlier when I was talking to people that, we just live in a weird time, like when cinema used to be the thing, like we used to go out and, experience all these different adventures and, things that would inspire us in terms of our creativity and stuff. But now it's just a market of numbers and finances and, concessions. And, that's really all they care about. And in a weird way, because we don't have video stores, we don't have Blockbuster, we don't have, Suncoast and all these different things. Actually, there's one in Texas that I just found out about the other day. There's a Suncoast. But streaming is becoming like the Blockbuster, of our lives. So
Yeah.
I think, Dr. Sleep, even though it's not doing so well right now, it's going to find its audience. Like, there's no question about it. And I think that's going to be, with a lot of movies that don't, maybe make the cut in the beginning. And, cinema's eternal, so
Well, I feel like that really ties in very well to what we're going to talk about with this episode, that the technology of entertainment is always changing. I still rent DVDs from Cinephile, but most people don't rent movies. They go on streaming services and search for them.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that technology makes for such good horror is that it is so constantly changing, and it scares us. The new technology scares us because we're like, that's, everyone's always like, ooh, what's going to happen when we inject media into our brains directly? It's like, that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
So I think that's why filmmakers over and over again tackle, the horrifying, whatever's happening technologically in the day and age that they're doing the film. And sometimes it holds up, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it gets a little dated. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell which is going to be which when you're first watching a film. But I think we have some solid ones lined up.
Yeah, if you guys aren't understanding, like the category or the topic of tonight is actually tech horror. And as Holly said, like, it's always ever changing, and, there's always, more scares, that are able to come out of the woodwork because of the fears that people have in terms of, maybe, feeling like they're being spied on, which is probably the truth. And, all these different, like things like, Alexas and homes and all these different, things that are happening right now in terms of technology. But I think, there's also things that are like, you know, that just never go away. I mean, ever since James Cameron showed us Terminator, which is obviously going to be on our list, I think that's a fear that people still have to this day, you know, that we're just going to be taken out by AI and maybe some robot army of some sort.
Singularity is such a common concept now that now it's like in this post-Matrix world. But you know, when Terminator came out, and still, it's a scary thought.
Mm-hmm. Especially
the scenes of the future where, you know, you realize there's nobody driving these killer machines. It's just the machines themselves. You know?
Yeah. So the topic tonight is tech horror, and we're going to start off with Holly because, you know, we got a nice little list, you know, to talk about. So, Holly, you know, like you did a lot of research this weekend. You actually watched a lot of stuff, went back and watched some things, as did I. What is the first one on your list to talk about tonight?
Well, it could be any of a number of ones, but I think I'm going to go with a pair of films. The original Japanese Ringu, Deo Nakata's Ring, that was released in 1998, and the original Japanese Pulse, released in 2001. I believe there was a crappy American remake of that one, but I didn't bother watching it.
There was, yeah.
But I loved the Japanese one. And I think these are important because they came just at the turn of the millennium, when that huge cultural shift was happening from, like, you know, videotape to DVD to Blu-ray to, you know, and the idea, the very concept of cyberspace was like a pretty new one for most people.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't know if nobody's seen Pulse, essentially it's, the basic concept is that the souls of the afterlife, you know, there's no room for them, and they're being pushed out into technology or computers, and people are being haunted by their own machines, and it's really, it was terrifying when it came out, and it's still very scary, and I think it was timely because, as I said, when it came out, the internet was just, you know, getting its mojo, so to speak, and the concept of there being this space out there in the internet that is full of, you know, ghosts, essentially, made it a really, really powerful film for the time it came out, and it's still a very powerful film. Yeah,
for sure. And then of course The Ring.
Yeah,
sure a lot of people have seen the American version, but yeah, brush them up on that one a little bit if they're not familiar with it.
Yeah, well, Ring is also interesting because, yes, just like Pulse, there is supernatural activity happening. The Japanese one from 1998, it's basically there is a cursed videotape that people watch, and then 7 days later they get 7 days. 7 days later they get a phone call, and they're basically told, you know, that they have 7 days to live.
Sure.
And it's basic. Actually, the American remake, I don't slag it off because it was well done.
No, it really was. You know, the sad thing about, we're going to get into some comedy territory here for a second. The Ring has been ruined for me because of Scary Movie. And, like, because I automatically think of that particular video where she's, like, you know, pressing her ass on the toilet, or the guy is, and all that stuff. Because, you know, before, like, that was, you know, like, when I saw The Ring for the first time, the American one, that was very effective. Just the way, you know, the style of that video was, you know, was just perfect. You know, it was like a freaking, like, it was like watching like a freaking like 9 Inch Nails video or something.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that you know, that technology, even though it's very much of at the time period when the film was made, still resonates, because a videotape is something that you can copy, obviously, and it's something that you can spread, and it's the whole idea of your television, or, you know, your tapes or CDs, are being threatening, like being able to come and get you, essentially, is, I mean, I know people who watch watched the original Ring. And when I first watched the Japanese one, it was in like 1999, and I was all alone in my apartment, and I had no idea what the film was going to be about. It was like a bootleg VHS, bootleg VHS.
Yeah.
And I was so terrified. I covered my television up with a blanket and slept with the lights on for 2 days.
Well, here's the odd thing, something like The Ring works, and then, like that movie came out recently, the App movie or whatever, and that didn't do very well.
Or no, Cam was the one that came out on Netflix that was supposed to be good about the web.
Cam. Oh yeah, let's give a little credit to Cam real fast. It wasn't on my list, but it was definitely it was definitely something unique in regards to just the idea that even the person that wrote the script was originally a cam girl, and she knows that life and that world, and I don't know, really it was very slow burn, and sort of, I mean, like it's supposed to be, it was, like sort of, pornographic or whatever in certain parts or whatever, but like, then it kind of became this like Black Mirror episode, by the time, the third act came around. I really liked Cam a lot, but I was just wondering why you think something like The Ring would work, right? And then something, there's a movie that came out, I think it's called Countdown or something. It was about an app that I guess is like a haunted app or something like that. And it kind of reminded me of that scene in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where she was talking about doing the cell phone movie. And they were just like, Russell Brand and were just like, well, that's stupid. Like, like, why don't you just unplug the phone and then people.
Yeah. Well, I think now we're coming at it from such a removed, cynical perspective because technology has changed so much.
Do you think it's just because there's so much of it now that like people are just kind of like, like
that's possible, but I mean, I feel like we have to get through the novelty phase first, before it wears off, and then we can start deconstructing it. Like apps are still a fairly recent technology, and so like Alexa, for example, like personal Google assistants. Like if somebody made a horror movie right now about a Google assistant going psycho, it probably wouldn't be all that scary. Just because it's still a very new idea for us.
MGM presents Westworld.
Your attention, please. We will soon be landing at Westworld, the ultimate resort.
So I'm going to piggyback off of that. And, I always had, well, you can kind of like, jump in too. But, before we got this like really surreal, magnificent, like series on HBO, Michael Crichton was, the guy to make stories about things, breaking down, like in terms of amusement parks and, certain situations like that. I wanted to bring up the original Westworld.
Absolutely.
Because I do feel that's a horror movie. A lot of people would say that's a thriller or it's an action adventure. But if you look at it,
it appeared on the cover of Famous Monsters, which officially makes it a horror movie.
There you go. Before we even get into the story of that, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's
consists of 3 worlds of the past.
Locking in now.
Worlds where you can live out your every fantasy.
It's 2 friends who go to it's kind of on the lines of what from the show, at least in the beginning episodes, the first season. But you got 2 friends that go to this, park called Delos. And, like it's just basically, a place where you can just like, let all your inhibitions just go wild and free. You want to kill somebody?
Your move.
You can do it. Obviously you can't hurt any like human beings, but you can affect the androids that are built for this particular theme park. And, there's brothels and all kinds of things. And that was something that Westworld, the show, actually played into in the beginning, was that, these androids were, becoming, like they were becoming cognizant of, like their surroundings and what they're meant for. And they wanted to break free from that. And I think to a certain degree,
our technology is designed to provide all this in complete safety.
this maybe has something to do with that when it comes to the Yul Brynner character, who just basically just goes offline and just decides, like, I know what my purpose is, and I'm going to enact, murder on a human being.
Raw.
Because I'm not just a plaything, and so he basically it's kind of like that line in the beginning of the Dark Tower series, and the gunslinger followed because this one particular guy is like kind of chased through this amusement park by this thing that just wants to fucking murder him.
The ultimate resort. Boy, do we have a vacation for you.
And it's kind of terrifying. It definitely,
It's terrifying in that film.
Yeah. What do you have to say about the original Westworld? Because I wish more people knew about it. And I think because of the show, maybe people ventured back to that and Future World, which is obviously the sequel to that. But what are your feelings on Westworld? I mean,
I love it. I have not watched the new series, but the original film is, I think, still really effective. Even when they go behind the scenes and find all the androids and stuff, I think they're just vague enough about it that it doesn't become kooky and stupid, and the build-up, of course, is really great. Like, it doesn't just plunge right into the robots. Like, you see these, ads for where you can basically go into any world you want and pretend like it's real. Like,
Sure.
And people go to Westworld to be in the Wild West, and and it's a while before things start breaking down. And I feel like that is part of what makes it work for me, is that it's not just a crazy murder machine, but
yeah.
At first they go in and they're like, this is the best thing ever, and then slowly they discover that it's not.
Well, it was just, it was just like, it was all sleight of hand. I mean, even, like the friends themselves, like you're seeing James Brolin and you're thinking like, this is the tough one, and it turns out to be the other friend, and just everything that, everything just worked, especially, even just the look of Yul Brynner himself. It was so simple. It was just like, contacts, a certain contact in the eyes, and, of course there's other effects, when they take the face off and all that, but, when you see him running around, he looks very human, but, just very cold and calculated, and, he's going to get his fucking man, like that's, it's super, super effective. And obviously, created a legacy that's, going on to this very day. I wouldn't necessarily compare those two. It's like really apples and oranges, the show and the Westworld movie. But I did love, there was a scene with Jeffrey Wright, I believe, and he was, in the facilities, like, where they, work on the androids and stuff, when certain things happen and whatnot. Yeah. And, when the mutiny actually happens, not to get into spoilers with the show, when he gets deeper into this area, you kind of see Yul Brynner's character, like, off in the back, just shut down. And you're like, yeah, I knew it. Like, it all connects, Yeah. That's a great one. I've always loved Westworld. So if you guys haven't seen Westworld, please, do yourself a favor, because that, if you're a fan of Schwarzenegger in Terminator, I think Yul Brynner's...
What a great segue into Terminator. Just because it has, the same, mindless killing robot thing. Terminator is very 80s. But I think it still works. It's still effective, like the way they do the time loop.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's so many films where the time loop just gets too convoluted, And they're all like, oh, but if you go back here, then that erases this thing, and then that erases this thing, and then we have to go back here, and blah blah blah. And I think for Terminator, it was very straightforward, and it just and very very effective the way it was. Like, you know, we're in a future where the machines have taken over and killed most of humanity. Mm-hmm. So they send the machine back to kill the woman who is basically has the son who's responsible for the rebellion, and then the human goes back and follows him, and then it turns out the human went back to follow him ends up being the father of the man. Who,
sure. Well, you know, I know I'm a man, and according to Elizabeth Banks, I ruin movies with strong female characters. But I personally love the Terminator franchise. I did enjoy Dark Fate quite a bit. You know, for what it was, because, you know, like if you're looking at it, you know, from just, you know, like the ground floor in regards to story, you know, when you're just seeing, you know, these two major characters unite and stuff like that, you're not going to get the inner center of what I think they were trying to imply, which was that in a weird way, like the story was kind of shifting where this, you know, T-800 model fucking Terminator killer was becoming human, and Sarah Connor was becoming more of a machine, you know, like where she was just, you know, like, I'm going to get my man, and, you know, like I'm tough and I'm bad, and you know, this and that. So I like that part of it. Terminator, the original, you know, obviously I've always been a huge fan, just like a lot of people. But the thing I love about it is its simplicity. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like that it does very much play like a horror film, where this, you know, like this, you know, particular model of, you know, of Arnold Schwarzenegger is, you know, basically, you know, rifling through a phone book and killing every single person with the same fucking name as Sarah Connor, you know, just massacring police stations, you know, killing people left and right, no remorse whatsoever. You know, so technically, you know, I think they even mentioned it in the movie itself, you know, that, you know, I think there's an APB where they're looking for a serial killer of some sort. It's outright a horror film, no question. And, you know, obviously, like, you know, it's got sci-fi elements, you know, and, you know, we see the future and stuff, but even the way that's, you know, kind of like, you know, like the way we see that, even that's horrifying, you know, before it gets, you know, into like, you know, like action territory, you know, say with T2 or the other films, you know, after that. Everything about that movie is just absolutely fucking terrifying.
Yeah. Especially, yeah, the scenes in the future where the machines are, you know, chasing after them. And it's of course the end. God, the end is when he emerges from the flaming truck as just a moving skeleton with glowing eyes, and that's really frightening.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this, and I actually had the pleasure of saying this to him quite a few years ago, because I, you know, talked to him quite a few times, and that dude's like always been one of my heroes in terms of cinema. But, you know, that is Michael Biehn's movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he doesn't get the credit that he deserves, but that, you know, Kyle Reese is just one of the greatest characters in cinema, no question. And, you know, it just that whole story is as simplistic as it was, and you know, it really did kind of have kind of like an indie feel to it too. You know, before it became like, you know, this massive mega blockbuster that cost like, you know, like $300 million fucking dollars or whatever. It really, at its core, it was an indie film, you know, indie sci-fi horror.
Well, yeah, because when you go into the middle of the movie, it becomes completely character based, as the two characters get to know each other, and tell each other stories. You know, and Michael Biehn's telling her stories from his time, and that whole center of the movie is the heart of the movie. Without it, I don't think it would work as well.
Right. Hence, if you're not getting any kind of emotional, like, you know, feeling from the characters, it's just not going to work. So I think Mike Flanagan might be onto something.
Or no. Characters we care about, a novel idea.
So the next one on my list is actually, it's I don't know, I'd say it's an extremely underrated Wes Craven classic. Of course, everybody remembers Nightmare on Elm Street, or things like Last House on the Left, or even Scream, obviously. But one of my favorite movies of his growing up was Shocker. And we have this pantheon of characters that have become supremely iconic in the eyes of horror fans. But Mitch Pileggi as Horace Pinker should definitely be on that list if it's not already. And if you guys aren't familiar, Shocker was basically had to do with a serial murderer, and there was a police chief that was actually investigating him, and he ends up killing his his wife and 4 of his fucking foster children, except for one, which is a very young Peter Berg. And then it turns out that spoilers, but Peter Berg is actually his son.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Obviously he gets caught, and then there's this whole situation where he he gets sent to the electric chair, and he just becomes electricity. Which is awesome.
Becomes electricity.
Yeah. And there's actually a really great scene where he becomes part of technology, and there's a scene where they're actually fighting inside the TV, and there's they're just all the different channels and stuff, and they're just battling each other. Shocker's awesome. I wouldn't necessarily it's a popcorn movie. I don't think it really makes you think, and that's the thing too about technological horror, any style of horror. Obviously there's going to be things within a certain subgenre, and some of it's just going to be fun, not of it, all of it's just going to be boo, 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 you need to be scared of this, that's definitely one of them for sure. And you know what, let's just do a double pack here because it's technically the same thing. But another one I wanted to mention because I've always been a fan of Rachel Talalay's work. Her stuff has always been very punk rock to me. Obviously the Tank Girl adaptation, and a couple other things that she did. But one of them with Karen Allen was called Ghost in the Machine. And that's just another fun one. It was just she had she had a coworker who was what was he I think he was like a, I don't know, he's like a Rolodex killer or something. He went through her information, all the numbers that she had, and he ends up getting into an accident, and and kind of like Horace Pinker, becomes the ghost in the machine. So all these people that are in a Rolodex end up dead. You know what I mean? They're there's washing machines blowing up, and he's killing people when he becomes part of a hairdryer, and just real silly fun shit. I love movies like that. I don't that's the one thing that I've mentioned before, that I don't watch horror that to go, oh well, that's interesting, I need to think about that. I just want to have fun sometimes. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what's great about the horror genre in general. So it can be any of those things. It can be a cerebral mind trip, or it can be stuff blowing up.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't seen either Ghost in the Machine or Shocker, get out there and go watch that shit. And I'm sure if you can't find it, this man will probably have them on at some point.
Probably.
Just give it time. So what's next on your list in terms of technological horror?
Well, I wanted to...
Let's talk about Demon Seed. That is a
Demon Seed. Oh, wow.
Yeah, the original title carries the Demon Seed. And I know I made a joke about it in the Stephen King episode, but that is actually a story that was based off old Dean Koontz. And
Was it really? I didn't know that. Oh.
yes, yeah. So go ahead and let people know what this crazy fucking movie's about, because
You mean the
wow.
AI that takes over the house and then attempts to impregnate someone?
Yeah. There's a couple interesting things about this movie, and I had to, obviously go back and research this one in particular because, there's so much to it. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't place it in popular culture. I think there was an episode that was very similar in, to certain respects. I think there was a Simpsons episode where Pierce Brosnan was falling in love with Marge and he ended up killing fucking Homer, and but I obviously this whole cybernetic organism wanting to impregnate a human woman, that obviously had nothing to do with it. I mean, maybe implication or something like that, but Julie Christie was the star of this movie, and she was a big star. She did Don't Look Now, and all these different things, and the fact that she was in this crazy movie. Insane.
It's been a while since I saw it, but I just remember turning it off and just being just profoundly disturbed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a scene in the movie that, more people should be talking about, because if you recall, she does get impregnated, by these cybernetic organisms living in the house, and her husband comes back. Her husband was, I think he was some sort of, tech genius or something. I think he was the one that actually built the house. He finds out his wife is still there and she's pregnant, and then, she has the baby. And there's a scene at the end of the movie where they actually see the baby, spoilers, they see the baby in an incubator. And I think the robot said to her, you need to let this gestate for 5 days. And it turns out that this gruesome cylinder that they end up, just smashing and whatnot, it was actually, it was a reproduction of their late daughter who had died. So that's the ending of that fucking movie. So basically, it kind of plays out where technology is a threat, but actually it's well, we're giving you a gift. This is what, you wanted, so this is what, what we're trying to give you. Again, it's a fucking Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, and I mean, Black Mirror itself is just technological horror, basically.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that whole thing is, yeah.
So yeah, that's why I think it keeps coming back to Black Mirror. But
oh, dude, we can talk about Black Mirror till there's so many good episodes of that fucking show. I didn't really get into the show. Actually, I went back and I watched the old ones, and there's has to do with government and fucking a pig and
the first one's about fucking a pig.
And I'm like, what the? Are you serious? But the one that really caught me was, not to get too much into it, when the guy was, they were on the Starship Enterprise, and it turns out he was actually stealing office workers and forcing them into this Matrix situation where they can't escape. This dude is lonely, and he just he wants this obviously this girl that he's supremely attracted to and has no chance whatsoever. And of course all these people in the office that hate him, he forces them to live in Star Trek, in a Star Trek situation. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, anyway, what's the next one we're going to talk about here?
Well.
Oh, did you have anything to say about Demon Seed at all before?
Like I said, it's been a really long time since I watched it. I just remember being really entertained and also disturbed.
that about says it.
I mean, I feel like it has a lot in common with Hardware, which is another 80s AI technology movie.
Richard Stanley, yeah.
Yeah, which is also really intense. The 80s were really good at scary AI stuff. Yeah. They really knew what they were doing. But
my favorite actors of all time, Dylan McDermott, was in Hardware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the movie that I actually would like to talk about is Cube, 2001.
Okay.
It a lot of people say it gets a lot of comparisons to Saw, just because the whole like trying to get out of a puzzle thing.
Yeah.
I think what makes Cube so different, what makes them so different, is that Saw has a very human intent behind all of the traps. Obviously, Jigsaw, there's a human mind behind all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas in Cube, nobody really knew what they were building, so the cube itself becomes this technological monolith that is the enemy. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's about a group of people who wake up in this giant metal cube with a bunch of different rooms that some of which have, deadly traps in them, or deadly gas or acid or knives or whatever, and they have to figure out among them like what their expertise is and how they can figure out which rooms have the traps and which don't.
I got a major confession to make. I have never watched Cube.
Really?
Yeah. Is that something I should?
I really think it's something you should watch.
Okay.
It's like I said, it does get a lot of comparisons to Saw, but there is that element, I think, where there's no mastermind behind it. So it becomes like.
Was that Rian Johnson? Who directed that?
Vincenzo Natali.
Oh, I was way off.
Who also did. Let's see. Oh, well, interestingly enough, he did In the Tall Grass recently.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Oh, he also did Splice. That's what he did.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
But not only is Cube really, really mind-blowing.
The patriarchal, like, animal, like, incest, just, oh, God. Oh, Splice is amazing.
Well, Cube is not, doesn't have a lot in common with Splice, but it's unnervingly violent. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of these traps, like when one of them gets sprayed with like skin eating acid, and and it's just they don't hold back. Like, it's just
fuck
pure gore. And some of the other traps are where, like, they're metal things that come together and slice these people up into little pieces, and it's really a violent film.
Holy shit, I didn't know the movie was about that.
Oh yeah. Are you kidding? Absolutely. And I think another thing about it that I really admire.
Oh, you know what it is? I actually confused the movie Pi with Cube, and I never wanted to watch it. So,
I've never seen Pi, but I don't think they're the same thing.
Okay, that's good.
Another thing that I really admire about Cube is the complete reversal of character loyalties. Mm-hmm. Like, in the opening, like, say 20 minutes, you have this concept of who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, or who are the people who are going to end up screwing it up for everyone. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the film, those expectations have completely reversed, which I think is.
So even that aspect is kind of like Saw 2, because it's like you see these two guys, and you're like, like, hey, they're prisoners, like, we should probably trust them, and then it obviously, like, it all kind of switches.
Well, but again, there is no mastermind, so it's not like one of them has built the entire cube to torture the rest of these people. It's just really good character work, really violent, and just a great film overall. So see Cube if you haven't seen it. That goes for you too, Rob.
Okay. I'm definitely going to check out Cube for sure. Let's see. Let's do a couple more.
Should do Upgrade.
Upgrade, yes. You obviously working for Famous Monsters. I think, like, not to get off topic, but I think because of the guy that's manning that movie, that the Invisible Man is going to work.
Because Lifestyle is a genius.
Yes, and it was because of Upgrade that I truly believe that. And the weird thing is that when Upgrade came out, it came out at the same time that, you know, Venom with Tom Hardy came out. So there was a lot of comparison, you know, when it comes to...
Everyone says that Logan Michael Green looks like Tom Hardy, and it was like,
Kind of did, yeah, for sure.
Technological version of Venom, and it's like, I don't think that's very fair at all.
Yeah, but it was just such a beautifully done movie because, you know, like, you know, it plays into, you know, like a situation of, you know, this thing, you know, that's supposed to help you, you know, in terms of like, you know, support, you know, in regards to your health and all this, you know, like just kind of takes over your body, you know, in this symbiotic way, and gives you all these, you know, different aspects of yourself that you never would usually have, like being able to smash some guy's head in like a fucking, you know, like a watermelon, and, you know, all that shit, you know, karate, basically. That dude, like, was a fucking ninja, like, by the time the movie ended.
Well, and also all the limitations it gives you, because he's you know, he's a paraplegic before they give him this
Sure.
Quadriplegic. He's a quadriplegic before they give him
yeah.
the AI implant in his brain. And so when the doctors who were controlling the AI, when they decide to shut it down, you know, he's screwed. He's got to find a hacker somewhere who can reboot that AI so he can move. And he literally falls down like in this dingy hallway in a building and can't move because, you know, and that's a really, I think, potent metaphor for like what it's like when we lose technology all of a sudden.
Sure.
Like you know, in the way that you never realize how much electricity you use until the power goes out.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, absolutely. And you know, obviously, like, you know, not to give away the twist, but, you know, it was, well, we're going to probably, but, you know, when it becomes the intention of the AI to take over the body and, you know, like you become the vessel for, you know, something else. I mean, you know, that is probably the most, you know, terrifying aspect of Upgrade, or movies like it, you know, but, you know, like, I mean, it was just effective. It was just like, you know, the comedy worked, and, you know, it was kind of like this, like, in this weird way, it was like this, like, strange, like, kind of buddy cop style movie with, you know, like some gruesome moments, and
in that way, it does have a lot in common with Venom, where there's like a voice in the back of your head.
Oh, it was just charming as fuck, and I was just so into it the entire time. And you know, obviously, like, you know, Lee was part of the Saw series, and he helped with that, with, you know,
he starred in the very first Saw.
But I think that was the movie where I was just like, yeah, man, this dude, you know, aside from the Saw franchise, is seriously going places. And you know, I was so blown away by, you know, after the debacle of the Dark Universe, like seeing what he did with the Invisible Man. You know, it's fresh, and you know, I honestly, I just think Elizabeth Moss could do no wrong. I just don't see that movie being a failure.
Yeah, no, as soon as, I mean, I knew it was going to be great, but as soon as I watched the trailer, I was like, this is going to work, because I was wondering what angle they were going to take.
Yeah. Now, Fantasy Island, on the other hand, now.
And Blumhouse, they just got their little paws and everything, don't they?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about one that you haven't seen.
Okay.
And it's a David Cronenberg film. It's called Existence. Now, I wouldn't even be able to really describe the plot of this, you know, particular movie, but it is Jennifer Jason Leigh and Jude Law. There's some really great cameos in the movie, like Willem Dafoe is one of them. And basically what it is there's this video game programmer. Her name is Allegra Geller, and she creates this symbiotic gaming device that literally gets jacked into your spine, and you know, go into this, like, you know, this virtual place. So, you know, she gets she's at a secret conference. She gets attacked by somebody, And then of course, Jude Law and her like basically like, on the run at this point. And, like the one thing I can tell you is like, it's so gross.
I love gross.
The actual system itself is so gross and weirdly very sexual at the same time, because she's laying there on the bed, she jacks it into her back, and she's kind of like got it wrapped around her toe, and she's, it's and it kind of like, it kind of gestates and moves, and
David Cronenberg has always been great with that body horror.
Oh my God. And like obviously like when they get into the virtual world, that's when things go real batshit. And let's just talk about the Chinese restaurant scene for a second. So they're in this virtual world. They're sitting there at a Chinese restaurant that's obviously like, like a fabrication as you like understand it of, like this particular gaming system. So there's assassins within that are still trying to find Jennifer Jason Leigh. So there's this really disgusting platter that's dropped in front of Jude Law. It looks absolutely horrible. It's like, like these like, certain like, it looks like mutated fish basically. Like sushi on a really bad fucking day. And then all of a sudden, Jude Law, like, realizes that he knows how to put a weapon together. So he starts taking, like molars out of his fucking mouth and like, hooking up like all the bones of this fish to make like a fucking weapon, and starts using his teeth and starts loading it in his bullets.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the guy that's supposed to be the assassin that's sitting there gets hit in the face with this fucking thing, and you see this tooth go right through the guy's cheek, and it just explodes.
Nice.
Yeah. It's a real serious mind fuck of a movie. I mean, and I mean that in the, oh God, like everything about it is a mind fuck. And then of course, there's a part, like obviously where you kind of get an idea in the final act of, like, oh, maybe they're not in this virtual world, and maybe they were actually in the virtual world in the very beginning of the film.
It's got those layers.
Definitely worth a fucking watch. Existenz it's a cult classic for a reason, and David Cronenberg is the king of body horror.
He really is.
And there's really nobody that's going to be able to take that away from that man. That dude is just perfect with that kind of thing. And so
Videodrome itself, seeing tongues come out of a television, like you just never get over that stuff. It's creepy.
Well, yeah, we didn't really talk about Videodrome. Long live the new flesh. So let's talk about the Videodrome for a minute. That's definitely one on the list when we talk about technological horror. Just like, maybe Terminator, obviously, because of the legacy that it's built for itself, and Westworld, the legacy it's built for itself. I think Videodrome is probably one of the most important in the subgenre. Would you say that?
Absolutely. In fact, it's the one that I think of first when you think of
tech horror
tech. Videodrome right away.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's exactly what it is. That's its subgenre essentially is David Cronenberg doing body horror with videotape.
Yeah.
So.
Well, from what I gather, was when Cronenberg created Videodrome, I guess the story was like when he was a kid, and I remember this too, like, once the actual channel ended, like when we were kids, like, like it just went to fuzz. So I guess the idea was like, hey, what the fuck is going on behind that static? You know what I mean? So that's kind of like where he got the idea for Videodrome. For me though, it wasn't her music. Like that was the movie that made me fall in love with Debbie Harry. I mean, she does some really wild off the wall shit in that movie. And, of course, like, there's iconic scenes with James Woods, like, actually like, digging into his chest to pull out the weapon. And, like, oh man, like, Videodrome is, that's the thing about Cronenberg. He's so great with great with adding like this really like like he adds like government, he adds technology, and there's always like and every movie he does for the most part is like kind of like like oozing with sex, you know what I mean? Like there's just
well, it's like they're always very sexy movies. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, super, like with Debbie Harry just like burning her nipple with a cigarette and all like
Yeah.
Yeah, Videodrome I think is certainly like that's top on the list. Do you have let's do one more before we leave here.
I have Tetsuo Iron Man on my list. Which is a cult Japanese flick.
I've seen Tetsuo the Iron
about
Man.
a dystopian future where a man essentially tries to replace all of his body parts with metal.
Yeah.
And it's a total mindfuck. It's super violent. It's like the definition of cyberpunk. Like if you had to like, if somebody asks like what cyberpunk is, like it's this.
From the makers of Meatball Machine, if I'm not mistaken. Like
that makes sense. And also Tokyo Fist.
That's right. And what was it the Frankenstein woman versus the fucking I don't know, man. Those movies are fucking off the wall.
But yeah, Tetsuo is just incredible, partially because it's in black and white, which I think makes the violence feel a lot more stark. Like it's not like
it's not Tony Stark though. So Tony
full-color Technicolor violence. It's like it's distilled.
Don't hear Tetsuo the Iron Man think you're watching fucking Iron Man because you're gonna be sorely mistaken.
Think about that. Wow. Somebody trying to go watch Iron Man and picking up Tetsuo Iron Man instead.
Right, you mentioned Iron Man and Stark and like yeah.
I'm gonna file that away for later. But yeah, I think the black and white really helps distill the violence into its just most basic brutality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a feel-good movie. You don't want to. If you want to have a nice, calming ride and have a happy ending in the end, then don't watch Tetsuo. But it's super cool and totally unique. I've never seen anything like it.
It's very to use an overused phrase, it's very Lynchian, that movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's really not what you expect. I wouldn't necessarily, it's not technological horror at all, but I just watched Bong Joon-ho's Parasite today, and that's another film that can't be categorized, and I think something like Tetsuo, is that Japanese or is that Korean? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's Japanese.
It's Japanese, okay. Yeah. I mean, these are films that can't really honestly be categorized,
Yeah, and what would you call Tetsuo Iron Man or like what would you say?
I mean it'd have to be something like really like super fucking creative, like
I do find it funny that in the 80s, especially, everyone was all gaga over Japanese tech and how they're going to be like the new tech giants. And several of the films that I've mentioned today have been Japanese. They're just ahead with their tech, I guess.
Yeah, Tetsuo the Iron Man would be like, hey man, like if you ever wanted to like, I don't know, if you ever wanted to do like an 8-ball and then like fuck a car, you know what I mean? Just like, just like a super weird adrenaline rush. I don't know, like a pornographic Transformers to a certain degree.
Transformers. Wow. I like that. In fact, I'm going to use that every time somebody asks me what Tetsuo is like.
What is do you have one that's like your top one, like in terms of this subgenre?
I mean, it would probably be Tetsuo, to be honest.
Tetsuo. Okay.
Everything I've talked about so far is up there with my favorites.
Yeah.
I didn't get to. I mean, there's some cheesy 80s horror that we can add, and and some movies have like certain elements of them that's technology, and all the other stuff isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say the pairing of Ring and Pulse are probably my top, which is what I mentioned at the beginning. So.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna actually finish with the one that I told you I was gonna finish off with, and I mean, a lot of people would say like, well, it's not really like technological horror or whatever because there's really not that thread throughout or whatnot. But I am going to end with Poltergeist, simply because I mean, we could sit here and talk about why that movie's so effective and why it works. But the reason I want to put it at the end of my list as one of the tops is because I remember the reaction that not only I had as a kid, but every audience member had in terms of this sweet little girl being sucked into the television set,
yeah.
Like just the whole thing with the static and, like the, she turns around and says, the TV people, there was nothing like that, I think, before this, that, was like really honestly that effective. And then of course, the Freelings kicked the fucking TV out of the motel room, so obviously like,
Yeah. Well, and that aspect reminds me of Ring too. It's like when a movie can make you scared of an appliance, Like,
yeah. I mean, really, I mean, I'm not.
What always stood out for me about Poltergeist was the meat crawling across the counter.
Yeah.
That was always the freaky bit for me. It was a sentient meat.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into like, we all know why Poltergeist works, like just the family dynamic is perfect. And, the dynamic, like, the marriage is, just like perfectly detailed. And I mean, but that particular moment, I mean, not only is it like one of the most iconic things in the fucking history of film and horror itself, it just, I don't know, just that, like that movie alone is just effective. I just, watched it maybe like a couple of years ago and was still on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, it's great. Can you imagine? It was rated like, it had some crazy rating like PG or something.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, how the hell did they get away with that? That shit was traumatizing.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah. So, there's so much more to talk about in terms of technological horror. And honestly, when we started doing this episode, I really didn't think it was going to be like a huge list of things to talk about. But there's a lot of things that we didn't talk about, and I'm sure, they're just as good as the things that we already mentioned. And, like if you're,
let us know what your favorite tech horror movie is.
There you go. Yeah. Let us know. Let us know what you think and, not to end on a horrible note, but, like there is a lot to fear when it comes to technology. I have, personally, I have an extreme love-hate for technology, but maybe it has to do with the fact that I am a Gen Xer because I don't really get bothered by the things that people usually get bothered about when it comes to, Russian spies and all that stuff that's supposedly actually going on right now. Or people, like corporations being bought out in regards to, like helping out certain candidates and, like dispelling others and all that stuff. And I don't really get too freaked out by like, robotics. I think it's all very fascinating and kind of hurdles us, closer to the future, which is really odd to say because, we just surpassed Blade Runner, which is like,
yeah, that's messed up. 2020. That's like a futuristic year in itself. 2020.
I know, right? It's just crazy, and I think we're getting to that point. I think technology is going to get stronger. you know, even these virtual reality games and stuff that are out now, like they just mentioned like there's a VR like experience for Doctor Who, and it's like you actually like, you know, like you're in the fucking, you know, you're in the TARDIS, and you know, like it's just crazy. Like technology's, you know, just gonna get better and better, and it's gonna get scarier and scarier, and you know, like you know.
Yeah, well, as a fellow Gen Xer, I get scared by technology today sometimes too. Like the entire concept of Alexa and just having something talking to you in your house is just, it just freaks me out. It freaks me out when people do it in the car too, when they're like, you know, they basically give verbal commands to their car, and I'm just like, I don't like this.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing about it. As long as that fear kind of, you know, like resides, there's going to be plenty of story to tell. Yeah. If they're not all a Black Mirror episode, there's a possibility that there's some really great horror that'll come out of this. But yeah, that's it, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe on the HorrorWeb YouTube channel. We love doing this show every 2 weeks. You know, join us. You know, join us in December. We'll have a new episode for you before the break, and that's really it. So, Holly, got anything else to say?
Well, I'm signing off. I thought we did a pretty thorough examination of. There goes my dog again. I think my dog should be the end of every episode. You know, the end of the werewolf episode, he started howling.
Yeah.
Now he's barking. So. Like
Sitabu sit. All right, guys, we're out of here. See you. Scary later. Talk to you soon.
Bye.